connected consumer.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Parks, and I am one of the hosts of Parks Associates podcast, The Connected Consumer. This podcast is all about Parks Associates' data-driven market insights on emerging consumer technology products and services, featuring our talented analyst team and industry leaders bringing new and innovative products to market. In this podcast, you'll get an inside look at the latest industry trends focused on the connected consumer, home automation and security, energy management, connected health and independent living, and digital content and streaming video services. Today, I am so excited to welcome our special guest, Tony Marlow, the Chief Marketing Officer at LG Ad Solutions. Tony Marlow has worked at several different data companies. Prior to this, he was head of Yahoo for over a decade and also worked at Nielsen for about 5 years. In this episode, we're going to dive into the future of video advertising, gaining insights from Tony's vast expertise in the field. So, Tony, welcome. I'm so happy to have you be able to join us today. I'd like to start and see if you could introduce yourself to our audience and share a little bit about the work you're doing with LG Ad Solutions.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, hello, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me on. It's going to be a pleasure to just sort of talk through some of these things. For your listeners who maybe are not familiar with LG Ad Solutions, we like to say that we're a global leader in connected TV and cross-screen advertising. So basically, we are a CTV advertising company. We have the media footprint of 150 million LG TVs worldwide, 35 million in the US. And on those TVs, we're able to serve advertising. So both video advertising, for those who are used to the 15, 30-second TV commercials, but also native advertising that's baked natively into some of the UI and home screen placements. And this is one of the higher impact, really rich ways that marketers are using connected TV to connect with their audiences. And then lastly, I'd say is the cross-screen piece of it. So that's connected TV, but we also know that a large proportion of people, while they are watching TV, are also multitasking on another device. We're able to help serve ads to those other devices as well. In terms of my role, as you mentioned, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer. So this means I'm responsible for all of the marketing and communications of the company. So in terms of the various disciplines, that means it's product marketing, it's demand generation, communications, both internal and external, insights, events, design, all of those things that come under really promoting what we have to offer the world. And, we're a B2B company, meaning that our constituents are advertisers and their agencies. And so all of those things that form marketing, I do have a very specific framework that I like us to operate around. And I talk to my team about brand, demand, and field command. So when you say, look, what are you doing as a B2B CMO? It's either driving the brand, driving demand, meaning demand generation, lead generation, and field command, meaning helping our sales force with the narratives, with the collateral, with everything that they need to be able to articulate our value in the field. So brand, demand, and field command.
That's great. A great way to summarize that. And we are going to get into talking a little bit more about some of those details. But first, can you tell me where you're from? And also, I want to know, I hear you're an Ironman triathlete. And so if you could give us a little brief background of what you do on the side, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So originally I'm from Australia. I've lived in the US. I moved to New York in January of 2010. And for those who are uninitiated, that is the middle of summer in Australia to the middle of winter in New York. To this day, I regret my timing, but I'll never regret moving to New York. I love that city. Just such an amazing place. In terms of the Ironman thing, I've done something like 30 something different triathlons. I've done every distance from Ironman, as you mentioned, but also sprints. And for me, I just have that competitive spirit. For me, it's just one way to be able to get the competitive spirit out. It's a lot of it is around planning. A lot of it is about where you choose to put your efforts. And one of the things that I really love about triathlons is it's a multidiscipline sport. And you don't necessarily just evenly divide the way you prepare. So it's swim, bike, run in that order. That's how you'll race. But that doesn't mean you necessarily put most of your effort in the swim or an equal amount of effort into the swim. In fact, most professionals and most serious triathletes know that the bike is where, if you put a little bit of extra effort there, you will gain a lot in terms of your time. And so I think I love triathlons because it's sort of a metaphor for how we operate professionally. Um, where do we choose to put our effort? Where do we choose to put our attention? And can we do so in places that are going to have an outsized impact? And so for me, I love competing. I love racing, although I don't do it as much as I used to. I do love the principles that it's brought into my day-to-day life.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations on being able to, do that many races and keep up and also continue that. That's awesome to meet guys like you who have that competitive edge. I'm sure that's also helped you a great deal in your career. Let's talk about streaming services, though, and especially where advertising fits in. So Parks Associates is doing a ton of research in this area, now showing that 87% of households have at least one streaming service, and we are counting 41 million households are projected to watch AVOD or ad-based OTT services in 2023 out of the 119 million that we're tracking within our research. So this swing to advertising services is real. So tell me, in your experience, how would you describe the past 5 years, and then maybe zone in even on the past 6 months for the video distribution services industries?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in what you just said. I mean, I would say probably two major things have occurred. And here at LG Ad Solutions, we refer to this as the big shift. Um, the big shift had two phases, and let me explain what I mean by that. So if we rewind to early 2020, coinciding with the onset of the pandemic, what we essentially had was millions of people worldwide, billions of people worldwide actually following stay-at-home guidance. People were at home more, they were watching more television. They started watching more streaming television at that moment in time. And there was this huge hockey stick of growth. And to this day, where we've sort of analyzed the data, there was probably a 3-month period where we observed 3+ years worth of behavioral shift in terms of how people watch TV, because it was just this sudden state change. But how it was consumed back then was primarily through these subscription services. So think about the original version of Netflix, where you pay a fee, you get your content, and there are no ads. That was the vastly predominant way people were watching their streaming television in 2020, when this behavior really started to grow. And right now, basically for the majority of this year, we are currently undergoing the second phase of this big shift. So the second phase, as you had kind of alluded to, is really transitioning into adoption of ad-supported models, sometimes called free ad-supported streaming television, FAST, free ad-supported streaming television. And that is where there's some surprising behaviors going down right now. So while the numbers might not be exactly in alignment with the Parks Associate, directionally, it's really consistent with what you said. So we observe 80% in the US using ad-supported CTV. One of the things that really caught my attention is we did a piece of research that found 63%, that is more than half, actually prefer ad-supported models. And if you were to rewind to when it was predominantly this subscription-based consumption, I think there would have been broad-based rejection of the ad-supported model. But as we enter a period where people do have economic concerns, as we enter a period where there's just such a tremendous volume of content and tremendous ability to choose between them, people want more content, they don't want more fees, and they're turning to these free ad-supported models.
So that's great information, and I know you all have done a lot of research in this area. I was looking at some of that reporting, really nice and slick looking. Uh, we've alluded to this idea of the unbundle and the rebundle, the unbundle of cable that's been taking place across the past few years, at least 5 years now, and then this idea of the rebundle, the new bundle for the all of the content, and the bundle could be the broadband players with the streaming providers, it could be the streaming providers with the streaming providers, it could be the streaming provider with a movie theater, right? There's so many new ways to get in front of the consumer. Would you say that we're going through the unbundle and the rebundle, and how would you describe that rebundle that's coming now and even more so in the future?
Yeah, I think one thing we can all agree on is that it's complex. I mean, even as we record today, only a few hours ago, we saw Disney Charter finally reach agreement. They were almost at the point where Monday Night Football would not be available for these Spectrum customers. And so that's just one example of this becoming an increasingly complex ecosystem where people now have more choices for how they access the content they want. Sports was like the last bastion of linear television, but that is slowly starting to change, as we saw earlier last year with Amazon going into the NFL with Thursday Night Football. We've seen some of these things really change around streaming. It's complex. But when it comes to content, I actually put most of my attention on the consumer experience rather than some of the more complex deals. And I think there's a couple of clear things happening with the consumer, which can really inform us as brands, as content providers, as conduits for the content that's on there. And we know that discoverability is a really big thing for users. In fact, we did one piece of research that found it takes fully 5 minutes, 42 seconds on average between someone turning on their TV and then ultimately choosing what they're going to watch. And so there's this discoverability window. Now, for what we do, that does present a pretty positive opportunity for a brand to be present during that time within the user interface and connect with their audiences, particularly if they're offering content. It becomes a very target-rich canvas for them to make that connection, help guide that discovery process. So you're helping them there. And then I would also say CTV, connected TV, it's not your grandmother's TV. It's not the same passive medium that it was. And there's so much, and I think I'll allude to this as this conversation goes on even more, but there's so much where it is now a lean forward medium, whether you're just talking simply that you can choose what you want on demand, whether you're talking about shoppable experiences, gaming. TV is changing, as is the content and the utility of what that screen offers. And so I think that's an important piece of the recipe. What TV means to consumers is really different now to what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. That influx of technology creating this whole new kind of experience for the consumer is showing up everywhere. I mean, we see that certainly in video and content distribution, but also, let's say, with our work in home security and watching how traditional professional monitored security players are really having to transform themselves because of new technologies like the Ring doorbell, where we're tracking doorbell adoption now at 20% of households, and those doorbells also offering professional monitored security. I mean, even Roku jumping in the game there and introducing a home security solution. They see that television as the heart of the home and an interface for not only the digital media content and the video that you want to view, but also maybe what's going on in the perimeter of your house, or understanding who might be at the door if you have a delivery, and really connecting those ecosystems. And that's something that we've been looking at since my mom founded the company, is that whole home experience and bringing in controls, entertainment, and video. And so it's really interesting how that the choice is really expanding things and creating a whole new world for consumers. On the brand side and with the advertising, tell us, how are these companies, the companies who pay for all the advertising, I mean, how are they navigating and making decisions on where they're going to try and get the eyeballs and the traction for these products that they're trying to sell?
Again, I think there's a lot in what you were just asking, but it's interesting that you say eyeballs, because I think a pretty well-known adage within the advertising industry is these ad dollars, they follow the eyeballs. And if you look at what consumers are doing, if you and I were having this conversation 5 years ago, I would say to you, traditional media, so TV, radio, print, even desktop internet, they're all in contraction in terms of how people are spending their time, in terms of share of time spent in the US. And that is true. According to IDC data, literally they're shrinking in terms of share of time spent. And if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, I would say to you, the single only medium in growth is mobile. Everything else is contracting. But now the story is a little different. Mobile does continue to grow at a much slower clip than it has been, because it's so near saturation. But what we're seeing is connected TV is the second and only other medium that is in growth in terms of how people are spending their time. So the eyeballs are going to connected TV. People are starting to adopt ad-supported versions of TV. Marketers are realizing this is the place where I need to connect with people. This is where people want to make that connection. With broad-based, we said it was 63% acceptance of the ad-supported model. It starts to become a really effective way for brands to connect with people on the biggest screen in the home. And so all of that, it was interesting you did choose the word eyeballs, it's where attention is going is the place where marketers should be expanding their effort to make those connections. And that's what we're seeing. There's been a tremendous uplift in terms of the investment into ad-supported connected TV. And I think that we'll see this continue through the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also that introduction of interactivity with the television where you can incorporate social content, and video, the actors, the brands that are even in content, and being able to extract upon those and learn things because of the aggregated group of people who are watching that type of content. So there's really a lot there, even so much that we are doing a lot of research and studying this idea of T-commerce and the purchasing of goods and services through the television, which of course starts with your streaming service. A lot of streaming services are ending up getting bought through the TV or added on through the TV. We also see those bundles in lots of other ways. So what do you think about this idea of consumers making purchases directly through the TV platform and having perhaps the Uber Amazon experience of clicking a button because I saw that shirt and I want it, and it's delivered the next day without me having to do anything because all my credit card, all my information is already there. I know the brand. I know I want that shirt and I want it tomorrow. Is that all going to play out that smoothly? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, this question is massive. And it does come back to what I started to allude to a little earlier. So really, we have this vision of a future where TV is this immersive canvas of personalized experience. So it's content, it's advertising, it's gaming, and it's shopping. And now shopping's a little bit tricky because I think that there's going to be multiple avenues to success here. I do think the one or two click path to purchasing directly from a TV, whether it's an item of clothing that's featured on an actor or whether it's an overt ad, I think that will be part of the story. And I think you'll see some huge advances in making that a more frictionless experience. And at the moment, I think there is some work to be done to continue to make it more frictionless. However, the other thing that we're observing is that, and we know 96% of people are multitasking on another device typically when they're watching TV, and that device tends to be the mobile phone. If you can bring that shopping experience from the biggest screen on the wall into the screen that's in the palm of their hand, and right now QR codes are having a resurgence because they're one easy way for those things to connect. So, for example, we recently were promoting, we're doing a campaign with the Barbie movie, and they had tremendous success with using QR codes to drive ticket sales to local movie theaters. And it's just an easy way to bring that experience onto the device that people prefer for making some of those decisions. And so I think it's going to be both of those paths, actually using the biggest screen in the home directly, as well as bringing some of the content, some of the advertising and other experiences into the palm of the user's hand in terms of their mobiles.
Yeah, that QR code comment is really interesting. My favorite use case on the QR codes is when I go to a hotel, which I have to travel frequently for work and other things. But be able, the TV turns on and then it there's a QR code to scan, and now it's connected with my phone, and my whole
Yeah.
profile actually can pull up in that guest hospitality experience. And I mean, we're doing a lot of research work in that area, so it's amazing how that has seen a resurgence, particularly with COVID and like menus. Now they don't have menus; you just scan a code and view the menu off your phone. So interesting use cases for the TV environment. Tell me what you think some of the greatest challenges right now are for content providers. I mean, these are the content companies trying to become the service company, and is that working for them?
Well, it's funny, but before we get to that, I was going to respond to your last comment. I think there's another piece in addition to that user experience. There's the data that drives relevance of advertising. So by that I mean the wastage that used to occur in linear TV by me seeing an ad that's irrelevant to me. So maybe, maybe Nike's advertising their shoes, they're pushing women's shoes to me. I'm just not going to buy it. I'm not a person who's in market for that product. Show me some Nikes that are good for a man in triathlons. That's going to work out well for me. And what's interesting is we're starting to see these data triggered ads really take off because they're driving this hyper degree of relevance while enabling these brands to have a national scale. So, for example, you could be a clothing brand using weather triggers. Am I pushing wet weather clothes on a rainy day, warm clothes on a cold day? Maybe it's a hot day. It could be these performance fabrics. But your campaign can be live everywhere with relevant products being featured that are either shoppable in the moment or easily transferred to the mobile. And I think that's another piece that's really changed. In terms of the content providers, I do think that you're going to see, as people have more and more choice, as there's complexity like the writer's strike that we're observing right now, we're seeing a couple of short-term things. In the short term, you're seeing people lean into live events such as sports or other live non-scripted programming that's not relying on these writers. You're seeing people lean on back catalogs. Remembering the last time there was a strike of this nature, there was not this slew of content that was available on demand that existed. Right now, it is easier than it has ever been in human history to look at a back catalog of content, whether that's drama, comedy, and I think that changes the game. So we're seeing some short-term shifts in how people are consuming TV, and it will be interesting to see how that dispute gets resolved. Because the longer it drags on for, I think the longer and more lasting the impact of it will be. So I don't have a crystal ball, but we do see some very specific user changes based off just the content that's available changing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you make some really good points on the data side, because I mean, there's no better time to say data is gold than now. And we were saying that a decade ago when we were talking about big data. So my final question, and because we're close to the end of our time, is really to ask you about that role of data and the measurements of what people are watching and how that's working out. Can you share any perspectives you have on the different companies that are, of course, LG ads, you guys have some data that you're putting out, some of the research work you've done. Then we've got companies like Nielsen, we've got iSpot, there's a lot of new companies getting in the mix and trying to come up with the accurate metrics for the advertisers to really latch on to.
Yeah, and just for clarity, LG Ad Solutions, we don't try to get into the measurement game, not in sort of a viewership sense. We really do think of ourselves as primarily a media company. However,
Gotcha.
what we do have is what's called ACR, automatic content recognition. I often think of it like Shazam for your TV. So it's a technology that determines, it uses both audio and video. We use a hybrid system. There are alternate ways of doing it, but a hybrid is generally accepted as best practice. It uses this technique to understand what is the TV show that's being watched, what is the ad that's on screen right now. And the way we use it, rather than to say X million people watched a particular program, we use it to help our marketers target. So we could say maybe your household are sports enthusiasts or movie buffs or really into the news. Those viewership habits can help tailor which audiences you target. And so, the Nielsen's, the iSpots of the world, I think we value the role that they play in helping media planners and marketers understand what are they getting. And for us, we use similar data in a really different way. We help it to really target more so than measure the effectiveness of the campaigns.
And is this where that term addressable smart TV comes into play?
Yeah, well, I think addressable, you ask a few professionals in our space, what does that mean? I'm sure they'll give you a few different answers. But essentially, it just means that we have an understanding of, who is in this household. We have an understanding of what the relevance is. And that is what makes it addressable, as opposed to just the old shotgun approach, as they would say. With linear TV, it would just be huge amounts of wastage where you're hitting people who are just not in your target audience. The addressability helps you minimize that kind of wastage as a marketer. And then, as we sort of have entered this AI revolution, artificial intelligence really has many promises, whether it's like dynamically changing advertising to be most relevant to a given person, or whether it's about creating these custom targetable segments that maybe are so complex that humans literally don't know how to define a particular segment, but we do know from the leverage of machine learning that it's going to work. And so I think right now we're on the precipice of AI really shifting the way all of that works.
And does this all this new technology getting infused into the back end experience, basically? Do you see this shifting the formats of the advertising and allowing for all sorts of new things to be experimented with in terms of capturing that consumer's attention?
Yeah, I think absolutely. So right now I gave you the example of weather triggered ads. I think as we move forward, there will be more and more sophisticated versions of that. Where, and think about it, maybe you're a wireless company, and Elizabeth, maybe you're in the Apple ecosystem, and maybe I'm in the Android ecosystem, as in I'm a current Android user. You could be well, I won't name any brands, but you could be one of the predominant wireless companies. And for me, serving me Android based products is probably going to resonate more so than for you. And the campaign that you see is one for Apple. And I think we're going to see this kind of data informed creative decision just become more and more commonplace.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about, and there's so many spokes and or trails you could go down. Even if you think about, let's say, like Apple and Major League Soccer and Messi, and now you have these three huge kind of ideas and things that are happening, and they can get interweaved, and the fan base there and the love for the game and the family aspects can really create this whole new world of revenue. Right. And that is what it comes down to. In the end, we're talking about business, we're talking about making money, and we're talking about meeting people where they're at, and in terms of what we're trying to sell to them, what they're watching, what they might want to watch next. And certainly technology is transforming everything in the way we're watching TV and video and the devices for it. So, Tony, I'd love if you could maybe share some final thoughts on where you see the future going. I don't know if you want to comment on the short-term future, the next 3 to 6 months, or if you'd like to comment on 3 to 5 years. That's always a little harder looking out in that crystal ball.
Yeah, I think it's really things that I already touched on a little. So I do believe that over the next, let's call it 12, well, 1 to 3 years, 12 months plus, we're going to see television really transform to become much more immersive. And I don't mean a little bit more immersive. I think the way in which we'll consume TV in 1.5 years from now will be really different to right now. And we're just starting to see some of the leading indicators. And then I think AI has the power to transform everything. I mean, what's a podcast if you're not talking about AI? But I mean, we've seen, I think ChatGPT consumes most of the oxygen in the room when you're talking about AI. But we've seen studies published out of the University of California where they use AI models to be more accurate at detecting Alzheimer's, and they can do so 6 years ahead of human practitioners. So in medicine, it's going to change things. In advertising, I think it's really going to be about more effective targeting, more effective creative, and minimizing wastage, making sure that these campaigns are more efficient. And while I think it's going to transform everything, I think that's the way we'll observe it within advertising and within connected TV advertising.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Tony, for joining us. We also want to thank you for your team's support of Parks Associates' Future of Video event. I know y'all have attended as speakers and attendees, as well as some of our research. We greatly value hearing from you, and know our audience will too. So thank you again for joining us today. And if you are in our audience, please make sure that you are subscribing and submitting a review to Parks Associates podcast. For those of you watching us on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button, and feel free to comment about any topics that you're interested in. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Really appreciate the time.
The Connected Consumer.